I'm going to say a phrase, and I want you to grab onto the first image that pops into your head, no matter how fleeting. Ready? The American dream. You got it? Hold on to your image for now. The American dream is an elusive concept, one whose meaning has changed over time and place. At the core of the American dream is a sense of utopia, that this idea of America is an idyllic place, one full of possibility, where one picks themselves up by their bootstraps to make it happen. At the core of this, however, is the question of how to make it happen. And the simple answer is this: consumption, the act of consuming things. American history is built on this mythology of consumption. Consumption of the land through westward expansion and manifest destiny. Consumption of resources such as coal, electricity, water, and steel, to the point where we have an entire infrastructure around controlling nature. Consumption of mass-produced foods and products such that the, air quote, average American body is larger than that of our ancestors, and we're surrounded by a lot more stuff. To quote a famous song, and you'll thank me for not singing it, "A dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep." The American dream creates a hunger, and the more we consume, the less satisfied we feel in the long run. After all, how does one eat a dream? I'd like to hone in on one factor of the American dream, that of transformation. The American dream rewards transformation, provided one works hard enough. The idea is that the end goal of the effort, you know, that one that you're picking yourself up by your bootstraps for, that is the transformation, meaning you can become something else, but keep a piece of your old self. To illustrate this, think of it like becoming both a car and a robot. You can transform yourself into this new figure and back again, maintaining your personality as both a car and a robot. But if you actually stay the same, you can't really say you've transformed. Transformation is not a transactional trade between one thing and another. At the heart of transformation is metamorphosis, meaning you become something entirely new and can't go back to what you were before. This doesn't necessarily set us up for a Kafkaesque end of life, which is a valid fear. After all, who wants to die a cockroach? But there does have to be a categorical death before there can be a rebirth. The mythologist, Joseph Campbell, captured this process of birth and death in his definition of the hero's journey. The hero dies, journeys to the underworld, then comes back reborn, renewed and forever changed. Changed such that the end of the hero's story is actually supposed to be the beginning of the next one, but often that installment of the saga never gets written, making the hero's journey a linear, singular transformation. One of his contemporaries, the depth psychologist C.G. Jung, recognized that transformation is a process, a cycle. He described this as individuation, a psychological journey where one achieves an internal transcendence between the conscious and the unconscious. For Jung, each piece of the process involves guided analysis of unconscious archetypes and dreams, unlocking aspects of one's transformation. And a facet of this involves leaning into the idea of sticking to an image and fully unpacking its meaning. So let's stick to the image of the American dream. Now, remember that image I asked you to hold on to earlier? I hope you haven't dropped it because there is a quiz on this later. I want you to reflect for a second on that image. What inspired your image? How much of your individuality is reflected in it? And more importantly, how attainable is your image and how badly do you want it? Now, the American dream is potent enough that the desire for it is very real. You're supposed to want it. But since it's built on a consumption mentality, wishing and hoping just aren't enough. There needs to be some kind of economic mechanism, but it just isn't there for the 99% of Americans that never make the wealthiest Americans list, although I try so very hard. Inflation and rising costs make it harder and harder for the dream to become a reality. This is where education comes in. Now, how many of you were sold on the idea that you had to go to college to make it? For some of you, or maybe a lot of you, how much of that college experience did you have to borrow from the government? Gently shoving those loan papers in front of you, that financial aid counselor sold you on this idea that you're investing in your future and for better opportunities for you and your family. And if, like me, you were having those conversations as an 18-year-old who barely understood where money was coming from, it was an incredibly enticing sales pitch. Going to college was an investment in my transformation. Cool. But then the new millennium changed the rules. Now, granted, for those of us who were there, the turnover from 1999 to 2000 didn't wipe our computers. But on 9/11, those two towers represented an aspect of the American dream that, quite literally, came crashing down. Obsessively, we watched videos on repeat for several weeks, communing in a collective trauma. And as we watched those videos, we were seeing something bigger too, something harder to vocalize. Prominent symbols of American capitalism knocked down by one of the greatest American inventions to connect the global society. And this led into a narrative that we would feel better if we bought patriotic products and ate freedom fries, which, spoiler alert, taste just like French fries. With mayonnaise, not ketchup. We were sold on the idea that we would heal if we sent our children to a war whose purpose and villains kept shifting. Shifting because we were actually fighting an ideology against ourselves. We were projecting our shadow on the other side of the world, to avoid dealing with the very real issue in front of us. The widening cracks in the American dream. A few years and a president later, people affectionately named millennials decided to occupy Wall Street as a reminder of those cracks. They collectively pointed out that tuition costs were increasing, cost of living was increasing, yet the job prospects for recent graduates weren't increasing. They weren't proportional. New grads were sold on this future, but then found themselves underemployed because that's what was available on the job market, not the jobs they were promised. The student loan debt burden wore on their shoulders like Atlas's globe. Pragmatism was overshadowed by the American dream, survival of the fittest and the smartest. Get the A, get the degree, get the job, be happy, a very simple formula. But the idea of transformation got lost. The ritual of learning got lost. Now, American culture is full of rituals, but sometimes we forget to actually ritualize them because the American dream feeds a consumption monster. We are so focused on chasing the end goal of the transformation transaction, we end up diminishing the process of getting there. Now, y'all, I get it. Transformation is hard. And it's also scary, which is why it's so appealing, that idea to keep parts of one's old self. It's like going to your high school reunion to relive your glory days, or keeping that one really ugly, kitschy trinket because it's the only connection you feel you have to a particular someone or place. Or it's being able to jump between your car and your robot selves. So I'm going to make a bold claim. The fear of transformation is a fear of education. Now, perhaps more than ever, things are changing rapidly. Technology, social norms, viral hashtags. Change is one of those constants that any of us can rely on. The great poet, David Bowie, told us to turn and face the strange changes. But at the same time, the horror movies fill those strange changes with monsters and other frightening things. Those monsters are exactly the things we have to battle if we want change. And they can represent anything we need to overcome. By making education a transaction, remember, put in money, get the degree, the importance of facing those monsters diminishes. It's so easy that as soon as education gets hard, uncomfortable, or unbearably expensive, one can pop out of the process. And there are data all over the place about which people are more likely to ride out the wave, as well as those who just won't finish, which creates another monster lurking in life's closet, the cost of not finishing with nothing to show for it. And to make it worse, when people do go back, they're sold on the idea that they need to be driven by a piece of paper that says, with dramatic flair and in Latin, diploma. One's student identity becomes tightly intertwined with letter grades and grade point averages, and anything less than an A is seen as a fail. And so one's identity formation, their transformation, is arrested chasing a dream, and dare I say, an American dream. Now, earlier I promised you a quiz. So I hope you're still holding on to your image of the American dream. And here it is. Is the American dream a static image? Now, I hope you said no, because that's the right answer. The American dream means different things to different people, and we all have a different relationship to the phrase. Now, I have a proposal. What if we stopped defining the American dream by things we have or want, but rather by the journey it takes to get there? What if we reveled in the act of learning? What if we celebrated the process of transformation? What if we separated the American dream from rugged individualism and instead viewed it through a global lens, establishing a shared dream? It could just as easily be called the global dream or the Milky Way dream, which totally needs to be a milkshake flavor. All in service to making humanity a little more informed, a little more satisfied, and a little more connected. If we commit to sharing in the ritual of learning and lean into our transformations, then anything is possible. And that is my American dream. Thank you.